Hey, what's up? I'm here with Naylor of LCR.
How you doing? What's going on?
Good to see you.
You too.
We actually just recorded another video, so we've already been talking for a while. In fact, go to Naylor's channel. After you watch this, go to Naylor's channel and watch that video. It's all about recruiting and finding team members. But anyway, Naylor's passing through town, flew into DFW, and he's heading to see a good friend of mine, Marvin. He's about an hour and a half, 2 hours from here. Marvin's been in, I've known Marvin because he's part of Academy, he's part of Service Autopilot, and he's just become a great friend. And so Naylor's on his way to interview a pro, second season, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Get to know the pro.
Get to know the pro, sorry. Get to know the pro.
Okay.
And so he's on his way to see Marvin. But anyway, since he's here, we've been chatting offline for a couple hours here, and we thought we'd shoot a couple quick videos where Naylor's going to ask me a few questions, and you'll see obviously this week's video, and then I'll put up a couple more videos in the coming weeks. So
sounds
anyway,
good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for providing this content for everyone, and thanks for spending the time. Well, one of the things that through my social media years, a lot of people locally have come in contact with me, and one, it builds great relationships, but two, they also have a lot of different questions, and we talk about social media, and they know Lawn Care Millionaire, and they want to know information, or they have questions, and they just talk about different things. And one of the things that a friend of mine, he's like binge watch all of your videos, and he's like, there's a lot of great content on there, but some of it's like 5 years old, and I just want to know, like, is this still relevant? Like door hangers, for example. Like,
yep.
He was really captivated by the whole door hanger philosophy for marketing, and you made a video about that a while back, and he's like, is that still a thing? Are door hangers still a thing? Like, I'm not really sure how relevant that is. Yep. So
okay,
touch on that.
Yeah, and some of my content's definitely more than 5 years old as well. So it's a relevant question. I would say generally, and I would wager 95% to 98% of the content is still relevant. That would be my guess. I can kind of tell you what may be less relevant, and then we can give a few examples. I want to use this door hanger as a specific example. So there's a misconception that something that's older is less relevant. We all do it. We all want to read the article on Google that was published, excuse me, in 2020, not the 2018 article. Especially if you're looking for a review, and sometimes that is relevant. Like if it's the new model TV or the new model iPhone or whatever, yeah, the 2020 article is more relevant than the review of the iPhone 6. That's true, but generally, the topics we're talking about in business, they're generally principles. They're generally concepts and learnings that have lasted maybe 100 years, 10, 20 years, especially when you get into marketing stuff. So for example, psychology, marketing to an individual, getting in the head of the buyer, the language you use, their buying preferences, why they'd want to buy, concepts like how you go find them. That stuff's all universal. That stuff worked in the 1920s, it still works today. Now there's some things that might change. So as an example, now that we're in a social media world, our willingness to consume long form content is diminishing. But then you also could say, well, Joe Rogan is killing it with his podcast, and that is a long form interview, multi-hour interview, long form copy in a sense. So there's even arguments where, when somebody's interested in a topic, they'll stick around. They'll sit on a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan. But I will say that the social media world of bite-sized consumption is training us to consume smaller and smaller bits of content. That's an example of evolution over time. Okay? Gotcha. So as we talk about relevance, it could be that if I said in 2008 a 64-page sales letter works, or I don't know what year I just said. If I said in 2000, well, what did I say? I don't even know what I said. If 8 years ago I said a 64-page sales letter would kill it, I doubt I said that. But if I said that, okay, that's probably not as true today because we can see the buying patterns and the content consumption patterns of our potential client. If I said in 9 years ago that CityTurf has 30-something websites, and each website is focused on a keyword such as lawn care in a city or pest control in a city, that's a strategy that's changed because SEO is an ever-evolving strategy. If we talked about maybe strategy for Facebook 4 years ago, ever-evolving strategy. So generally when you get into things around digital marketing and strategy around digital marketing, digital being Facebook, pay-per-click, anything social media, YouTube, that stuff is ever evolving and it is constantly changing. But if you get into a conversation about how to write a headline, do subheads, call to actions, that evolves ever so slightly. There are tips and tricks. And frankly, all of the marketers of the world, and lump me into that world, lump you into that world, we're all marketers, you're a marketer. We're always selling a message of the latest and greatest, the new, the secret, the whatever. You kind of like, that's how you grab attention in a world where it's hard to get attention. And that makes us all feel like there is some secret, something that we don't know, some tool that if we used it would solve all problems. And there's not a lot of truth in that. And I don't mean anybody's being deceptive, but I'm just saying, like, you don't have to always have the newest idea. The ideas of 10 years ago worked. And so those are some of the ways you could think about that. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Okay.
Absolutely.
So maybe to speak specifically to door hangers. Door hangers is a wonderful example because everything you hear about is digital. Google AdWords, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, etc., etc., etc. And what you don't hear much about anymore is print marketing. They call it offline marketing. But it still works. In fact, some would argue that in some ways, at times it can work better because what's now happened, it used to be when the email wasn't prevalent, being an email that shows up in your prospects or your client's inbox worked really well because it would get all the attention because there weren't 50 other marketing emails in your inbox. But then over time, as we get more and more and more email in our inbox, it still works, and email marketing is an absolute strategy you should use, but it doesn't work anywhere like it worked 5 years or 10 years ago. The returns are diminishing, but it still works, so you should keep doing it. Well, print marketing, offline marketing is exactly the same thing. Now there's less competition in the mailbox, and there's less competition on the door, so your message has a better chance of getting through. And then there are some people that are literally shutting themselves out of their email and their social media, and they're starting to block those things. Not any big trend, but there's a group of people that aren't paying that close of attention to that stuff, especially people that want to be really highly productive. And so one way to get to them is through these other forms of media. So when you're thinking about marketing, just focusing on one channel, such as just Facebook or just pay-per-click or just door hangers, is not a good long-term strategy. You want to go across multiple channels. The things I just mentioned are called marketing channels. And so for that reason, door hangers absolutely still work. And I know I'm getting lengthy here in my explanation, but like everything, you have to know when to use a door hanger, the time of the year to use the door hanger. You have to know when not to use door hangers. You need to know the messaging of the door hangers. You need to know all that stuff. I guarantee you whatever I said 8 years ago about door hangers is 100% relevant today. The last thing I'll end with is I'm sure that over the years I've said things where my opinion has evolved over time. So for example, in, let's call it 2012, the economy was vastly different than the economy is today, and we're recording this in 2020. Very different times. So I'm sure some of those things are different. However, I would encourage you to listen to my thinking and my mindset and maybe learn from the way I was thinking. And I will tell you my thinking has evolved over time, but listen to how I think about things. I think that could be insightful as well. So I would say vast majority of the content still completely relevant. And as you're listening to something, just pay attention to how I think about things. And maybe there's some ideas for you there. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but just like how does my brain work? That might be somewhat insightful on how I'm breaking things down and thinking about strategy and such.
Awesome. That makes total sense. So I appreciate you shedding light on that.
Yeah, you bet.
Right. What about, so some of the guys, like, for example, they're asking about Service Autopilot, and it's just as a software in general, and they know that you have to pay a certain amount a month versus like, using Excel or Google Sheets or something like that, which is free and, it's easy for anyone to start out.
Yep.
And they have a hard time in their mind justifying spending a certain amount of money on whatever software it is, Service Autopilot or anything else, every month. they don't see like past, like they don't see the benefits of that. And the same thing with equipment. Like, why do I need newer equipment? Why do I need a newer truck? And it can be a slippery slope, I guess, right? Because when it comes to equipment, it could be more like a pride thing, more of a like, you know, I just want the greatest, latest, greatest, baddest, shiny stuff. So that could get you in trouble too. But when it comes to like software, I think that doesn't really apply. That is just really meat and potatoes, hardcore. Like, this is either going to run my business and take me to the next level, or it's not. And am I willing to accept that? And how do I justify that spend? So I've had a lot of people ask me those kind of things, like, how do you justify this or that? I don't know if I can justify that. And I ask them, how can you not justify spending that?
Yep.
Like, where do you want to see your business go? And how do you expect to get there without working in some spending strategically? Budget it in. Don't just go going into debt and buying all this stuff for no reason. Have a plan and be willing to spend for certain things. Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. I've got a lot of opinions, so I'll give you several ideas here, and because I don't want to lose anybody by using service autopilot as an analogy, and I'll come back to service autopilot analogy at the end, but I don't want to, if that's not your thing, that's totally cool. So let me give you some examples that may not involve service autopilot, and then I'll give one at the end. That way you don't feel like, hey, it's going to be a pitch for service autopilot and you leave, because I think this is a very important, broader topic. So maybe a way to think about this, let's use a lawnmower. You may or may not be in the lawn mowing side of the business, but let's use that just to make a point here. I think about this topic a lot because this has been an area of growth for me. I remember, before I do the mower example, I'll just give you an example because most people unfortunately know me since my life has become vastly different than it was in the early days of building the businesses. And so you weren't around to see how I was in the exact same spot you are, I guarantee it. And that's unfortunate. And in the early days, I'm just naturally wired to be very financially conservative. And I remember something as simple as just going to a conference, which actually is not inexpensive, or buying some information online. There were a number of individuals that were huge mentors for me. And I remember having to spend $190 a month for something that I could have got all my money back and canceled it anytime. And I was just unwilling to spend that money because I was thinking about the cost of it. Then eventually I did spend the money, and that's what changed my trajectory in business, like really got me thinking in a new direction. And there were a number of things, and so I want to make the point that I was not necessarily wired to just be able to spend money and move fast. Today I would say I move really fast as compared to most people. I am willing to spend the money, but it took me a while to have a lot of good experiences to understand how to know when to spend the money. So back to this mower thing. So I think most could relate to this. Imagine if you're in the lawn mowing business and you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you buy a homeowner grade lawnmower, and you spend whatever that would cost. I don't even know what that would cost these days. Let's call it $400. I don't know. Versus you could buy a whatever flavor mower you want. I'm just talking about a 21-inch deck mower here, and I don't even know what they cost. I don't buy them for our company. But let's say it was a $1,100 commercial grade 21-inch deck mower. If you're in the business, I don't really have to say much to you for you to understand what that difference means. And so, for example, if you clip a mailbox with the front left tire, it's a vastly different experience in a homeowner grade mower than a brick mailbox versus a normal mower. If the grass is tall or it's been wet or raining, it's a vastly different experience. All of those experiences translate into two things. One, some maintenance and repair of the equipment, but more importantly, loss of productivity. So you're losing money by having 2 or 3 individuals sit in a truck. You're losing money by not capturing all of your billable revenue for the day. And so when you only spend $400 on a mower and don't cough up the $1,100, not only do you have to replace the homeowner grade mower way more frequently than the commercial mower, you're killing yourself in terms of payroll and lost production, potentially bad reviews online. A lot of that stuff's invisible because we don't necessarily know, we don't capture very well how much money we're losing by having somebody sit in a truck, by having somebody now incur overtime. Some of us do, but a lot of us, those numbers are a little bit invisible. We don't capture and understand the cost of yet another bad negative review. We don't understand the cost of the fact that now you're not taking sales calls and answering your calls live at the office because you're driving a mower to a crew. And I could rattle off 50 of those examples. And I call those invisible expenses, invisible costs in the business. This is one of my absolute favorite topics. And it happens all throughout our organizations. And we can't figure out why we're stuck at a certain place in our business. We can't figure out why we're not making money. We can't figure out why things aren't getting better. We can't figure out why we're not taking home more of a paycheck, on and on and on. It's because we don't understand the invisible numbers of our business. And I just gave you an example with the lawnmower. The other thing is we don't have an understanding of what an item can do for us. So back to the mower example, there's the ability, or oftentimes we'll look at something and we'll be excited about, oh, that's a cool new truck, that's a cool piece of equipment, oh, I like that it looks new and my fleet looks good, and there's value in those things, but we're not so good at sifting out the benefits of a thing. Mower is easy. But can you describe, to the software example, could you describe what the difference between Service Autopilot and Jobber are great guys. I like those guys a lot. In Yard Books and LMN and Real Green, I'm naming all my competitors. Can you really determine what the difference is between all the software? It's difficult because Service Autopilot's like, hey, we do scheduling, we do automation, we do email marketing, we do to-do management, we do phone calls. Like I can rattle off a list. Well, every one of my competitors now rattles off the same list. We have Academy, now all my competitors have Academy, whatever their flavor of Academy. We have forums, now all my competitors have forums. So what happens for most of us is it becomes really difficult in terms of deciphering the buying criteria. Whether it be a piece of equipment, whether it be a truck, whether it be a piece of software, whether it be, should you be using an iPhone 10 or 11? Like, right. What's the incremental difference between the thing and what's the benefit?
Right.
And some, like we buy really cheap cell phones, but this is the thing we're on all day long, every day. What's the productivity loss of not buying the better thing? So the way I would go about thinking about it is, whatever this thing is that you're considering, how much of your day is spent using it? How much of your team's day is spent using it? If it's 20% slower, or it has 50% less features, and again, this could be equipment or software or whatever, it could be the quality of a chemical you're buying. If it's degraded by some amount, what is the cost? Like, what are all the things that fall apart or cost you more money, or in some way you're harmed by that thing not being as good? Am I explaining that very clearly?
Yeah.
That's what your analysis really is, because there is a time to buy a cheap phone. There is a time to buy inferior software. There is a time to buy the homeowner grade mower, but it doesn't take very far into your business, meaning you've existed for some amount of time and you're starting to have a little bit of success with maybe a helper or a team member or maybe some number of clients, that those things become bottlenecks and plateaus that should slow you down. Right. And I feel like I didn't adequately describe this, but if I could leave a thought with you, I'd say consider the invisible numbers of your business and really try to think through what pain is being incurred because something isn't good enough, fast enough. We always discount that stuff. We forget about its opportunity cost, a really important concept to understand in business. What is the opportunity cost of making this decision, buying this thing, versus making a different decision? And maybe I'll leave you with this. It's also readily apparent in hiring team members. Sometimes you'll be like, hey, I can only spend $13 an hour to get a team member. But maybe if you spent $16, which is $3 more an hour times a lower quality individual, now you've got a little bit more money and now you're paying $3 more an hour, $5 more an hour. And you can do that because you learned, oh, wait, I could charge more and people aren't going to all fire me. And oh, as my quality and customer service get better, people are willing to pay even more. And so now you've got a better team member. And so by having a better team member, a lot of the problems you previously had just naturally go away because you don't have the call-ins for they were drunk on Sunday night, don't come in on Monday, or they get pissed off and just leave your truck sitting in front of a property and leave. Like, those go away with a higher quality individual. Next, you're imagining all the stuff you have to be responsible for yourself and manage. But as soon as you get a manager to help you, a quality one, you've literally taken a pile of your daily activities and shifted them to their plate. You no longer have to do that stuff. And there's lots of the equipment that you were having to buy all used equipment. And so it'd break down, you're always repairing it, you're spending evenings in the shop fixing it. Problems go away when you have a little bit more money because the business is bigger, because now you can buy new equipment. If you run like we run, then you sell off that equipment every year or every two and buy new again. And you wipe out the majority of the maintenance items from your business. One more problem solved. Now I can just go down the list of things like that. Eventually you get big enough and you have a little more confidence that work will keep coming in, so you stop taking one-time work. Then one day you do this crazy thing and you only let clients pay you with the credit card the day after you do the work, and that just blows up your whole world in a great way. It's like, what? But that was a confidence thing. I didn't have the confidence in the beginning, didn't even have the idea in the beginning. But then when we did it, it was one of the biggest game changers. So what happens is over time, as the thing gets bigger and you gain confidence, you keep implementing one more thing that fixes a problem and another thing that fixes a problem, a better person, a better piece of equipment, a better marketing campaign, a better type of client, serving a smaller market. And then what do you know? One day you have a good business, and it's vastly easier. And then the ultimate of all, if you don't build a bigger business, and it doesn't have to be big, you have no backup plan. You fall out of a tree, you cut your arm on a chainsaw, you get a heat stroke, I don't know, I could make up a million different things. You have a kid or a family member sick in another, or like a parent sick in another state, and you've got to be gone. That ends businesses. And when you get a little bit bigger, you're buying a massive insurance policy to protect your business. And most people don't have that insurance policy, and it's one of the biggest reasons I'd advocate for going just a little bit bigger. It doesn't have to be big, just a little bit bigger, so you have a team that literally will help you, carry the load.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Good seeing you as always.
You too.
All right. See you guys later. Have a good one.